Hey everyone, I'm Dayna from Love OzYA, and I'm here with Sarah Ayoub tonight, talking about her new book, The Cult of Romance. Hi, Sarah.
Hello.
Now, The Cult of Romance came out the 4th of May, which is very exciting. And this is, I think, your third YA, is that right? You've also got a picture book?
It is my third YA. Yes,
Yeah.
my picture book came out in March.
Yes.
So it's been a couple of busy months.
Yeah, very busy, very busy. So for people who haven't read The Cult of Romance, tell us what it's about.
Okay, so I was inspired to write The Cult of Romance as I was researching for my PhD, and I was looking at the concept of belonging. And I noticed that when we interrogate that concept as migrant girls or intersectional girls in YA literature, it's always within the white dominant context. So I thought it would be really interesting to situate my protagonist in her motherland. So the book has two sort of elements. So at the same time that I was thinking about all this thesis stuff, I noticed, or somebody I knew got married when they were quite young. So I thought it would be really interesting to explore what it would be like for two best friends who have these plans to travel the world together when they finish school. If one of them goes to Lebanon and comes back engaged, and then what would happen to their friendship? What would that look like? I wanted to explore the choices that we make as girls, or the things that feel like choices, but they're actually embedded into our cultural identity or our cultural makeup. I come from a conservative Lebanese community, and in the Lebanese culture, regardless of what religion you are, marriage is a very acceptable, most encouraged life path for young women. And then, having children as well. So my story is about two best friends, Natalie and Janet. And Natalie is traumatized by her parents' failed marriage and the gossip that has followed her as she's grown up in her Lebanese community, because her parents never made it work. And then the expectations, she's raised by her grandmother, the expectations that her grandmother has of her, not to repeat her mother's mistakes. So they are two best friends. They have these plans to travel together. Natalie doesn't believe in love. She doesn't believe in marriage. She doesn't think, she thinks that there are so many things that, it's the future. It's the 21st century. Girls should not have to get married and have kids. There is so much more for them to do. And then Janet goes on a holiday to Lebanon, comes back engaged, and asks Natalie to be her maid of honor at her wedding in Lebanon later that year. So we follow Natalie to her motherlands for the first time, where she has to reconcile the good Lebanese girl that she did, that concept that she was raised with as a child, with what she sees in a country that has progressed so much since her grandmother left it 40 or 50 years ago, in terms of women's rights and just what is culturally acceptable, what is socially acceptable, and whatnot. And then there is a very attractive but very mansplaining, annoying best man. And yeah, there's like so many layers to that story. I don't know if I've done a good enough job explaining it, but yeah, hopefully that it does the job.
No, it is. I agree with you. There's so many layers with her exploring her identity, and her preconceived notions, or like her preconceived notions about Lebanon and what it's like because of the way she's been raised with her grandmother and her father. And then, when she gets over there and it's so different from what she expected. Yeah, there's a lot of her grappling with her identity, I think, around that, which is really interesting. One of the aspects that I really enjoyed as well was Nat and Janet's relationship, and sort of that exploration around the strain that can be placed upon female friendship when one of them enters into a committed relationship, a serious relationship. So was that something else that you were wanting to tease out as well?
No, I think that just kind of happened by accident, to be honest. It's not something that I've personally experienced, because I started dating my now husband when I was quite young. I was 19, and my friends were largely supportive. And I have I think I've always been known to be that type of girl that turns up for her friends. Like, he never came before my friends. Like, I mean, obviously he occupies a very important place in my life, but my friends never lost their status. That's probably a better way to put it. My friends never lost their place when he came into the picture. And I remember, like, a few years ago, my best friend turned to me and said, she was talking about someone else who, she stopped hearing from once she entered a committed relationship. She said to me, "You've been the only one of my friends who I never felt that with." And I thought that was really interesting, because it wasn't conscious. It wasn't like I consciously made an effort to stay, engaged with my friends' lives. It was just who I am. And I guess my friends were too important for me to even negotiate something else. So I just thought it would be really interesting because it's such a common thing with girls. And I just wanted the opportunity to tease out that there is room for us to pursue whatever path we want to take, and still, turn up for our friends. But at the same time, I guess maybe this book doesn't explore that, but there's also we might also reach a point where, we don't have to stay best friends with someone. If we're really different, we can wish that person well, and we can literally just want the best for them. But the friendship isn't the way that it used to be. And sometimes we can make that decision. It's really up to us to decide what works for us and what works for our friends, and go from there. It was interesting, I think, because it's such a nuanced topic, and there's only so much you can fit into a book. There is still now, like a year after it started going through the final editing process, where I'm like, oh, I should have put that in, or I should have put that in, but like, you'd never finish.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. So with your writing process, it sounds like it was very much, you started from that place of wanting to explore themes rather than say, dreaming up Nat, and she just came to you, which some authors say to me, oh yes, yeah, it was just fit with the character. But it sounded like you very much always wanted to explore some themes.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's part of the process when you're doing a like a creative PhD, where you're really immersing yourself in that genre, in that literature. And so the theme of longing and belonging was a big one for me. And I just was really struck by, I just kept thinking back to my first trip as an adult to Lebanon. So I'd been when I was 9, and then I went back when I was 20. And I just remember, for me, it was really poignant, because I had grown up at a time where to be Lebanese in Australia was the worst thing that you could be. We were on the front cover of every tabloid paper, like at least once a week. And talkback radio, and there were Cronulla riots. Like, I came of age at a time where to be Lebanese, to be Arab, was a very negative thing. It wasn't, these days, I know it's still not perfect, but these days we really celebrate cultural diversity in our books and on social media. And when I was a teenage girl, I felt so much shame around my identity, and that I felt like I had to justify that a lot. So I wanted to explore what it is like to be othered in your homeland, for me to be othered in Australia my whole life, and then to be told, you're not Australian, you're Lebanese, you're Lebanese, and then to go to Lebanon and be told that you're not really Lebanese, you're Australian, and to be called foreign. That concept of not belonging anywhere, not having a place, an identity that was concrete. So I do start with the themes. And I actually don't even write in order. I just write whatever scenes fit in with those themes that are really like burning, crystallizing in my brain. And then I fill in all the gaps later.
Wow, that's really interesting. And for me, because I went back and read your earlier book, hate is such a strong word. And for me, like I really was like, oh, these are very companion books in lots of ways. I mean, it makes sense because you're exploring a lot of those themes that you were just talking about, almost that sense of, it's set when there's been an incident, not as severe as the Cronulla riots, but, there's been an incident of, I guess, what do you call it, racial violence that's happened in the community. And, but it's very much sort of, I guess, set in that high school age group. And I don't know, for us in the Love Ausway committee, we've been talking a lot about new adult and YA at the moment because we released a recent column about new adult after talking to Jodie McAllister, who's got a book out about new adult. What was it like sort of writing a novel, a YA novel that was set that just a bit older, where Nat's 19, she's finished high school, she's into university and trying to start her own business and that sort of thing, versus Hate Is Such a Strong Word, which is very much set within the high school context?
Yeah, so I started writing Hate Is Such a Strong Word when I was a teenager myself. And it never really evolved from that voice, even though like I didn't get the book deal till my mid-20s. I started writing it as a teenager. So it kind of retained that voice. And I really had to simplify things a little bit, even with the Cult of Romance, because sometimes I would slip into the Sarah academic voice. That's what my publisher called it. So to me, The Cult of Romance is definitely a new adult novel. I don't see it as a young adult novel, although I've been told my books are clean. So like they, parents, for example, who might be a bit concerned about what books to buy or borrow for their child might find, comfort if their child is 14 or 13, because the book's quite clean. But the voice is distinct, I think. And so I'm in a very different place. I would love to say, it was a like deliberate artistic choice, but I'm not that clever. I was in a different place. I had experienced different things. I'd been a mother, I'd become a mother. When I was writing Hate Is Such a Strong Word, it was a completely different time. I hadn't been that long since I was in high school, so it was easier for me to write that high school environment. And in fact, there are certain bits from Hate Is Such a Strong Word that came out of like a book that I had, a hate list that I wrote in high school in lieu of a diary. So The Cult of Romance was a completely different experience altogether, because I had my research hat on when I was writing it. And so I hope it still speaks to teenagers. I think it will, otherwise maybe my publisher wouldn't have picked it up. But it was a completely different, and I had changed as a writer as well. When I started writing Hate Is Such a Strong Word, I'd never set foot in a creative writing class. I still haven't been a student in a creative writing class. I learned everything by experience and by practice. And it took a lot of drafts with Hate Is Such a Strong Word when my publisher signed me. And, same thing, even with The Cult of Romance, it just takes a lot. But my voice developed, my ability to write, to show, not tell, all of those things developed. And I really hope that there is more opportunity for Australia to grow its new adult list. And there've been some great, you mentioned Jodie's release. I think is it Georgina Young, her book Loner. I really, really loved that. Like, I hope that there is opportunity for us to keep growing in that space.
Yes, yeah. Even I read one last year, Sunburnt Vales, which was set at university.
Yeah.
Where
I actually endorsed that one and I did the launch. So,
yeah, it's a great book. And I was thinking about it quite a bit when I was reading Cult of Romance, because I think both of them, they really do a lot to sort of tell that migrant story, and that story of racism and things that needs to be changed still within society of just and to help Australians that are born here that maybe don't experience a lot of that what would we call it, racial stereotyping, what
Yeah.
it's like to go through that and to be othered constantly.
Yeah.
Um,
And they're both, Sarah Hagdusti was in student politics at uni,
mm,
and they're both like first-hand experiences that we have
yes.
fictionalized in some way.
Yeah, yeah. So, and I think that, I think they're both fantastic examples. And I certainly think that, yes, when you're in high school and you're thinking about what might it be like, your whole world is high school and it's so different when you actually leave. So, having some books that you can read and go, okay, this is what university's like, or this is what it's like after you leave, is really important. Yeah, it's interesting.
I think you could see it distinctly as well in the characters. I feel like Natalie's a bit more of a secure,
Yes.
certain of herself and her beliefs and her values than Sophie is. So,
Yes.
that's something that I hope the reader would notice.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I certainly noticed it. I thought, oh yes, you can tell um, that Sophie's a younger voice and is a lot more uncertain of herself, and whereas Nat is much more confident, much more angry, even about injustice and things that she would like to change. Mm,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So, is there something that you'd like readers to take away, particular from the Cult of Romance?
Ooh. Um, I've never really thought about it. I mean, I just want, I guess it's a pretty like standard response to say I want them to enjoy it. I find that because I don't get to read for pleasure as much as I used to, when I pick up a book and I get to escape, it's such a great thing for me. To have that kind of book that is just delicious to savor, to just have some time where it's just me and the characters in a story. That's probably the biggest thing that I want my readers to take away. But the other thing is just I always think of teenage girls. I always think of young women. I always think of the narrative that we are fed from from when we are young, especially intersectional girls, especially girls from migrant backgrounds in cultures that, you know, um, tend to prize their sons or have different rules for their daughters. I guess I just want those girls in particular to know that there is a world of opportunity out there, and sometimes it takes a little bit of hard work, or you feel like you're constantly chafing against your community's norms and values, but you don't have to completely alienate who you are um, in order to fit into that dominant white context and to fit what Australia wants you to be, that boutique multiculturalism. But at the same time, you are a you have a unique experience when you are growing up and you don't belong in either country, and that means you should be entitled to mold a life of your own making and your own choosing, and not be bound by old rules or whatever you're expected to be here. Just embrace who you are. And I know it sounds so much easier said than done, but I was once there, and I'm so secure and so happy because I got you know to do that. And it was hard in the start, but it's so much better now.
Mm. Oh, thank you so much, Sarah. It's been such a pleasure to speak to you about these issues and talk about your book. I really loved it, and yeah, it was almost for me like a holiday to Lebanon. Like I thought, wow, this is such a
Oh, that's
fascinating
what I
place as
want.
well.
I
So,
think that's probably something I would actually like to add, that the other reader takeaway for me is for them to see Lebanon as so much more. There's like this, it's got this stereotype that it's like this war-torn country, but it's actually a really beautiful place. The people live there like there's no tomorrow. There's so much culture. There's people coexisting from different ethno-religious groups and communities. There is beautiful like nature. There's an amazing nightclub scene, incredible food. There's a scene in the book where Natalie observes like this, I think she calls it like a dichotomy. There's a scene where a woman's walking out like from luxury stores carrying an Hermes bag, which is like $15,000 or $20,000. And then not far away, there's some kids begging for food. And so it gives a real insight into this country in the Middle East that people might have a very narrow perception of, and into a culture and into a community which is so diverse. And so I hope they get to enjoy that.
Well, I definitely did. And I definitely wish someone would invite me to a Lebanese wedding, because it sounds like an awfully good time and the food sounds amazing. I was very hungry the whole time reading this book, thinking, oh, I want to taste what that is. I don't know what it is, but I want to taste it. So thank
Well,
you
if you
very
ever come to
much.
Sydney, give me a call.
Okay, I definitely will. Thank you so much for your time, Sarah. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Dayna. Thanks for having me.